Welcome back to the DJ Sessions presents the virtual sessions where we feature DJs, producers, and other industry professionals from around the world. I'm your host, Darren, and right now I'm sitting in the virtual studios in Seattle, Washington, and coming in from, I didn't get it, Jesse. Where are you coming in from today?
I am from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, specifically Grapevine, Texas, from my office.
Yeah, from your office down there. And you are somewhat of a podcast aficionado. I produce one podcast, but you have a number of podcasts. Why don't you list those podcasts, and then we'll take them one by one and go down the line, and we'll talk about your involvement in the podcast industry.
So we'll go newest first. I do a best last hope for conversation, which is a Babylon 5 podcast. Buddy, Karen and Lou were one of my first podcast I was in was a Farscape podcast, which is the science fiction show from Australia, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time, I had never seen Farscape. So Karen and Lou had seen every episode of Farscape. So I would join them every week watching one episode at a time. And I was the rookie and they were the veteran. So, and then they have never seen Babylon 5, so we switched chairs. So they're the rookies and I'm the veteran. I was just telling you before we hit record, my buddies and I do a How Many podcast, and that is a pop culture discussion. For example, we will say, okay, here is Tom Petty's 40 hits. Which of these do we agree are great? And not from the perspective like a Tom Petty super fan, but just to the general population, So we've done everything from like top sandwiches to, the best of Marvel villains. So we do a wide culture. And next up everywhere is my Doctor Who podcast. Charles Skaggs and I meet every other week when Doctor Who is not going live episodes, going over old classic and modern Who episodes, reviewing them, talking to them. When there's new Who, we meet, we cover him every week. And then my last one, which is kind of my favorite, is Set Listing Bruce, a Bruce Springsteen podcast. And I've been doing that since 2015, where basically I've talked to Bruce Springsteen fans and other music fans from around the world. I've had people from South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Germany, Russia, Canada, the UK, all over the US, talking to me about the power and the magic of rock and roll. I do B-side episodes, Darren, which is where, let's say I've had a lady who loved Leonard Cohen. She joined me. I had someone who enjoyed the Bee Gees. They've joined me. The Who. So, for example, if I can convince you to come on, you would talk about electronic music and how much that has meant to your life. And so I got the term B-side, right, from the old 45s. You had your single and then your B-side. And so that's what I've been doing.
That is awesome, because I've been talking with a number of podcasters the other day, and they've asked me, what's the one thing that's most important about podcasting? If you could give somebody a piece of advice, it said, find something that you like and go for it and make it, and then promote that, get it out in front of other people that like that same topic, because everybody likes something. There's always going to be a group for something out there, and you're going to find an audience. Now, if you're trying to hit the bigger audience and trying to be like, okay, I want to cover electronic music, that's a very broad spectrum, but I could go down into the different genres and be very specific into a very specific niche of electronic music or rock music or artists or something like that. And let's see, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 podcasts going.
Yeah.
See, and that's just awesome. And that you can start this from your phone if you wanted to. Just, you don't got to be it's not a huge budget, but as things grow and you get into it, you start buying. I see you got your headsets there. We got our microphones here and my lights here and my green screen behind me here, but you don't have to start out with something. You don't have to start out with a big budget. You just have to start out with the topic and, find that topic and go down that. And I think one of the ones, I love your music podcast. I could talk my ear off about electronic music all day long, but I'm a huge Doctor Who fan.
Okay.
And I started with Eichelson.
Okay.
And that's where I got into it. I mean,
So,
I knew the name for years. Did I say it
yeah.
right? Chris
Yeah.
Eichelson?
So how did you find Doctor Who the first time?
I've been a science fiction person my entire life.
Right.
So when you said Babylon 5, aren't they rebooting Babylon 5?
They are. That
That's
was
what I
one
heard.
of the reasons why
Yeah.
Lou and Karen both were interested. And it was also an excuse for us to meet every week, right? You know,
So, yeah, I'm a huge science fiction fan. Somewhere, somehow, I don't think it was Sci-Fi Network. Somebody was playing it on TV. I know it had to be past 2013.
right.
It was somewhere past 13, 14. I'm trying to think where I could even start watching it regularly. And I think I just played that first episode and I was like, okay, I'm kind of hooked into this. And then David Tennant came in. And now I'm really hooked.
So is Tennant your doctor?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
couple things. One, if you aren't a fan of Doctor Who, you have to understand that you don't, like in Star Trek, who's your favorite captain? Or, or they'll say, who's your favorite Jedi? Or, what? But for some reason in Doctor Who, it's who's your doctor. Yeah. It is a very personal link, really quickly, I love Firefly, right? I was this huge Firefly fan. I use that as I was watching a Woody Allen documentary, and I was like, gosh, this is so many horrible things, and God, what did you do this? And how do you, and then it hit me, with all the things that had reported Josh Whedon had done, that you have to separate the art from the artist sometimes. So anyway, love Firefly. And I was listening to a Firefly podcast, and someone said that Malcolm Reynolds was really Captain Jack Harkness, because they both wear a long coat, they both love a pistol. And I went, I don't know who this Captain Jack is, but I need to go. So I went to one of my bus buddies who had been talking about Doctor Who forever. And I said, hey, who's Captain Jack? He goes, oh, it's on the show Torchwood. That's a spinoff of Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, well, can I watch it? He goes, yeah, here's the disc. Watch season 1. So I really like Torchwood. And so I went back to him. I said, I really love Captain Jack. Can I watch the episodes that, could you lend me the episodes that he's been on Doctor Who? And he says, it's just easier to give you the first season. Just, you won't understand. And so like you, I'm sitting there, I had the DVDs, I put in episode 1, Rose, and I understood the basic concept that different actors had been there. Mm-hmm. And I kind of, I knew the TARDIS, but I was blown away. And so I went through all of the different things. I agree with you. I fell in love with David Tennant. Martha is my favorite companion. I did not care for Donna till on this rewatch. I've got, okay, I see what she's doing now. I get that. And so Matt Smith was the first new Doctor I'd seen. And then we started our podcast when Eccleston was going live. So we've been carrying that. So what do you think of Jodie?
I don't think Jodie's bad. I personally think Chris's writing is not the greatest, or is given a fair chance. I think they tried to do something different, and now they're bringing oh, come on, what's
Russell T Davies? Yeah.
What?
Russell T Davies.
Russell T Davies. Yeah, they're bringing Russell back, and I'm like, okay, cool. And they have a new Doctor.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've loved Jodie.
Yeah.
I do think it is very kind for you to say that some of the stories have not done as well as they could toward her. Mm-hmm. And I am curious to see. My regret is, and for those of you who aren't Doctor Who fans, I'm so sorry that we've gone off on this tangent. But Russell T Davies was the guy who brought it back. Mm-hmm. Doctor Who had ended. They had been gone. They tried to do a movie. It didn't do very well for a lot of reasons, though the actor who played the Dr. Paul McGann was brilliant. So in 2005, when they rebooted, Russell T Davies was the guy who had a little, he had a little credibility, bit up with the BBC. They reached out to, and he was this massive fan. And he's like, nope, I'm not rebooting. I'm not doing a Ronald Moore, Battlestar Galactica re-imaging. We're not doing a remake. You know what? This is Doctor Who, and it's the same Doctor, and it's just magical. So he's coming back, and so we're going to see. He's been gone for a while. He's a very strong storyteller, and so I'm really curious to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, and you were speaking of companions and favorite companions. Mine was Clara Oswald.
Yeah, Clara's a great companion.
The Impossible Girl.
Yes.
She really, next to David, really captured me. And I think even Peter Caprialdi coming in, it took me a little time to warm up. It took me a long time to warm up to Matt. Now I can watch Matt and be like, okay, I love Matt. I get it. And Amy Pond and Roy, I love that whole storyline and how that came to a close there. But when Impossible Girl came in, I was like, okay, cool. And then Peter took a little, like I said, a little bit of time to warm up to. He felt to me, I haven't ever gone back and watched the previous pre-2005 stuff, but I have tried to, and it just kind of seemed the Doctor then was a little bit more older, cold, calculated, not so friendly, more. And that's what Peter kind of came off as, but then he kind of softened up a little bit over time, I think.
So I think what I'd recommend is you have to get in the mindset, and you also it's similar to if I just randomly went over to Sirius XM and went to an electronic music channel, I might go, I don't get this. What is this? Because Classic Who is slow. The special effects aren't very good. Understand it, it was a serial, so it might be a 6-part episode that's only 25 minutes each that you could tell in an hour, but they had to stretch it for an hour and a half. And so I always tell people that you have to get your ear and mind set to know what you're listening to. And that's what we do too. We pick an episode, and then when we're discussing it, we'll talk about, okay, in context, this is what this was, this is what we're going, and explaining it to kind of try to help people understand a little bit better.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I grew up watching some BBC stuff early on as a kid growing up. So I understood how BBC Studios worked, how it was that British humor, not necessarily American humor in the sense of things. And you can see that kind of in the first episode with Eichelson in 2005. It was kind of like, he just comes in, he's like, run. It's like the first thing he says to Rose. It's like, and it's action, the whole action, and it's kind of moving. And, I wonder if that's what Russell's kind of thing was like, hey, let's break away from this. Let's get a little bit more faster paced, get a little bit more going. But love that. Doctor Who, yes, one of my favorites. And I hope a lot of our DJ Sessions fans, out there are Whovians. Do I say that right? Did I say it right?
Yeah, Whovians, yes.
Whovians, thank you.
Yes.
And no, that does not spell TARDIS behind me. It actually says TDJS.
Yes, I know, yes.
So not to confuse anyone. But, as far as choosing, going after rock and roll, what was your premise for choosing rock and roll?
So, so stop me if I get too long. It was there is an origin story, Darren. So, I had been a casual fan of Bruce's music, probably since 1980, The River, and like everyone else in 1984, I was like 25, and everyone bought Born in the USA and all those hits on the radio, and loved Tunnel Love. I bought the box set, but then we had a kid in 89, other things going on. I got very active as a fan in the local Dallas-Fort Worth music scene. Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, Sarah Hickman, who is a singer-songwriter, Brave Combo, which is still together. They're a rock and roll polka band. So we would go to a lot of live shows, small shows. And so I did this, and I went to my first show I finally got to see Bruce live in 2002. And that was it. That was my road to Damascus moment. I went, oh my goodness, I've heard how good he is live, but this is amazing. So I all of a sudden ramped up my fandom. I was doing a Doctor Who podcast, and three things happened. Lynette Carolla, who used to be married to Adam Carolla, was doing a podcast and she interviewed friends of hers that loved Bruce Springsteen.
Okay.
And she quit doing that. Okay, hold on just a minute.
Sure.
Yeah, tell him to take a longer lunch, and then I'll talk to whoever he needs to not do this. Thank you. Sorry, edit. I'm at work.
Maybe won't. I like
okay.
Raw.
Yes, exactly. All right. So Lynette wasn't doing any more episodes, so I was like, man, I really want to do this. Then there was also a film called Springsteen and I, which was made up of a lot of fans sending clips of them talking about what they loved about Bruce Springsteen's music. And the third thing was I had been guest on another podcast set in the 80s. And we were talking about 80s music and 80s records. And we had to pick what was our top 3 albums of the 80s. And I realized I could have picked all Bruce Springsteen albums. And then, so then a buddy of mine, we actually we discussed Bruce's albums for the 80s. So I went to the guy who owned our network at the time and I said, hey, I want to do a Bruce Springsteen podcast. And he goes, okay, what's a Bruce Springsteen podcast? I said, I'm going to talk to fans from around the world. He said, where are you going to find them? I said, I'm going to find them on social media. He said, okay, go for it. And he hung up the phone and he looked at his wife and he says, Jesse's going to do a Springsteen podcast. I think we'll get a season out of it. And to him, a season was 12 episodes, right? And he is similar to what you said. If you are passionate about something, the only thing he'd ask is you got to commit me at least a season, 12 episodes. You've got to give me, do you have enough bandwidth? Do you have enough material to give it at least 12 episodes? If you do, I'm going to support you 100%. So I just hit episode 868. So that's why. And just, I love Bruce's music, and I love hearing stories of how not just Bruce's music, but other music has helped people cope with loss, help them celebrate triumphs. 2015, I was diagnosed with colon cancer. I'm fine now, but I had to go through rounds of chemo. I listened to music during all my chemos. I did not watch videos. I didn't, listen to podcasts. I just listened to music. When you are feeling sad, nothing helps you. There's that, I want to feel sad songs, that mope. Who hasn't had their heart broken and goes and plays, a song, whether it's, what could be, or you're thrilled, you're happy. Hey, turn up the music. Let's celebrate. Right. And so that's what the podcast is about. And that's why.
And over 800 episodes.
Right.
That's a feat in itself. And this is a weekly podcast, correct?
Yeah. So I cheated a little bit. So there, no one, I'm certainly not hitting the Guinness World Record, but I try to keep this fun for myself. So I do different things. So a few years ago, there was a talk about, when you're Catholic, you have 40 days of Lent, right? And a lot of people go to mass every day. So I was like, I wonder if I could do 40 days of Springsteen. I wonder if I could do a podcast every day, okay, that's a good challenge. And so, and I made it short podcasts. In other words, I would pick a lyric and I would talk a little bit about, like your Springsteen thought of the day. So I would pick a lyric, I'd talk about it, I'd explain it, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, right? So then I reached out to my listeners and I said, hey, sure would be nice if I didn't have to do all 40 days in a row. So I had listeners that send in their, hey, my lyric is this, or this is this, and did that. So I count those as full episodes, right?
Yeah. Nope. I would too.
Yeah. And so someday, and it depends. Right now, I have enough backlog that I usually do a new episode every Tuesday and every Thursday. I don't count, like, every once in a while you'll do a Throwback Thursday episode. Mm-hmm. Those I don't count as a new episode, mm-hmm. even though you might put a new introduction. I'm like, not to me. That just doesn't seem count. So yeah, so it's, my wife would tell you that I'm a little too obsessed at times with podcasting, but I love talking to people. I love sharing stories. I love people telling their stories. And I believe everyone has a story, and it's our job as podcasters to get them to share that.
Now, did you have any formal training before you started this? Any type of radio background, any type of anything that would have put you in front of a mic or in front of a camera before you started to do this?
Yeah, the closest is my day job since 1989 has been in customer support. Okay. So I take inbound phone calls. I started as an agent. I'm currently a director. So, I take unhappy people and make them happy. So I think that was it. I also have always had, as they call the gift of gab, very comfortable in front of audiences, telling stories. And I've been told by people that I'm a natural storyteller. I don't know if that's a very kind words, but I feel so. That was all I had. So did not know how to edit originally, right? I'd record this and I'd have to send it to our owner, Rob, and Rob would do the editing for me. And then, I finally started feeling guilty. I'm like, hey, Rob, do you want to show me how to edit? And he did. And then the next step is, okay, Rod, can you show me how to upload them? Like, how do I do this? And so at this point, Rob has disbanded the network and we're kind of free agents. I do my own sourcing. I do my own scheduling. I do my own editing, which very little edits. I'm like you. I put an intro in the beginning. I put an outro at the beginning. And unless someone specifically says, hey, I need to go to the restroom and there's going to be 3 minutes, I'll cut that out.
Yeah.
And then, I upload it and I do my promotion. And sometimes I find an audience and sometimes I don't. But what I tell people, similar to you, if you have a passion, go for it. I recommend you've got 3 or 4 episodes in the can, because if once you start, you want to get this out regular so that you can build an audience. 3, understand that the odds are you are not going to strike it rich and make a living doing this. If you are, God bless. But the idea is, will you do this for fun? Can this become your hobby and do something? Like, I don't understand, Darren, people that are doing podcasts on a TV show and they're complaining about it the whole time. And I'm like, then quit doing it. Just say, hey, we're no longer enjoying the show. We're going to go find something else and we're going to change our podcast to a different topic because we're no longer enjoying the show.
And that's the one thing. I was fortunate enough in my youth to play with a video camera at the age of 6 years old.
Okay.
My parents put me in some of the modeling programs that would happen at your local mall to kind of do the self-esteem thing. I had high self-esteem. I was really a smart ass as a kid, but it was really once I got into, I think something that you said that was beneficial for you in all of this was I had always gravitated towards customer service and sales jobs. And in that, you kind of have to be on your toes, on your feet. People are hitting you, they're bombarding you with different things. And with sales, you have to be able to research or be able to talk to people to get it out of them, what they need, what they want, what's going on here, how can I help you? And that kind of helped prepare for a lot of the script. The fortitude of presenting myself. I was never supposed to be in front of the camera. I'm not even supposed to be in front of the camera right now doing this, but the show must go on.
Yeah.
And one of those things that I said that we would never do is be not to knock it if you love it, but we're not a TMZ. We're not a National Enquirer. We're not a controversy kind of, or even going for that Barbara Walters, Oprah Winfrey, make you cry on camera kind of thing. Yeah. We're not going for that kind of story. We want to be about what's positive about the music, what is about the music, what brings you joy about doing the music, and why do you do this? The background of the music and why people are doing this. And everyone has their story, how they got started in this. And, that I think has helped me throughout the years. Like you said, customer service. Yeah. It was being able to say, okay, like everything I just put that right there it's very interesting. And a lot of people are shy. A lot of people they don't like to see themselves on camera. Then they don't like to hear themselves recorded, their voices being recorded. And that's one of those barriers you have to kind of get over if you want to get in this.
So one of the things, one of the best compliments is, at the end of the episode, we'll say, okay, we're done. That was so much fun. I forgot that you were recording me. We were just having a conversation. And I try to, like, what I do is I don't do a script of, I'm going to ask you 10 questions and here are they, but I do give an agenda. I say, all right, I'm going to start every podcast with, tell me about where you grew up and what kind of music your family listened to. Then when you went to high school and college, how did that change? If it's about Bruce, or if it's about Prince, or if it's about Barbra Streisand, when did you first discover them and what about them spoke to you? Talk to me about, have you seen them live? Tell me stories from the thing. Are there favorite albums or songs that mean a lot to you? Are there songs and albums that you haven't got to hear live that you want to hear? And then I end every question. I have a question I end every episode with, which is what I call the Mary question. And so I send that rough agenda, and a lot of times people will go like, oh, do I answer this now? I go, no. I just want you to be thinking about, because I don't want you to go, oh my goodness, I should have told him about that time I did blank, right? Where I ended up doing, my son did a paper on Bruce's, album. I forgot to tell you that. So that's why I do that.
Yeah, I definitely have been off the cuff. Sometimes usually when we're backstage with artists, you might get 5 minutes, 7 minutes with them. Right. And you just got to kind of be right there in the moment. And now that I get an hour with them, that's awesome. I do have to do some research on them. I do want them to be unique, but my questions come from kind of a template of about 300 questions. And I kind of see what they're doing and kind of start pulling different questions from to tailor it. And the one thing I love when I get from an artist is when they say, wow, that's a really good question. Right. I can feel that nobody's ever asked them that before, rather than doing a surface, type of thing. And it's just different styles, but you're still getting information, whether it's an open form, but at least I think what we're both saying that we have here, have some direction to the show. Just here's a little bit of a roadmap. I think that's a key factor to have, because like you said, if somebody's just going negative, well, is that what this show's about? Here's everything when we hate about this show. Right. I don't know. That could be informative. There's an audience out there for it.
Absolutely. And
I think, yeah.
And for example, I did not care for the Moon Knight, the latest Marvel.
Yeah, I did. I liked it.
Yeah, and that's why I just didn't care for the characters. I didn't like their story, their story choices. So I watched every week, and I sent an email. Here was the things I like and didn't like, because my buddy Charles, who I do the Doctor Who podcast, also does a Fandom Zone podcast where he talks about TV. I had a wonderful, just one of my best episodes. In fact, it was a nightmare. She had written, she was a writer, Joyce, and she wrote a really good column about why Bruce's album Western Stars, which is his next to last album, she didn't enjoy. It was it was released during this last presidency. She was wanting an angry political album, and she didn't get it. And so she was unhappy. So I reached out to her. We had a great discussion, and none of it recorded. Your nightmare, right? And so so I had her back on again, and we had a totally different conversation, kind of, because you knew better than to try to duplicate it. And it was a lovely discussion, because she was saying, it's me. And that's what I told my buddies for Moon Knight. I go, I get it. I get that other people are enjoying this, and good for them. It's not clicking with me. And I know, the cliche, it's not you, it's me. But often in the entertainment world, that is. So I want to make sure I have no problem. And I have reached out to people who, I don't like Bruce Springsteen. Okay. Do you want to join me on the podcast and tell me why? Well, he's too liberal. Okay. Do you want to join me and talk about, you give your side of it? If you're more conservative, I would love to have you on and discuss that. But if you're consistently not enjoying something, you go, okay, maybe it's time to move on. Right?
I don't like eating coal. Yeah. Let me do a podcast about how much I don't like eating coal.
Exactly.
Then stop eating.
Yes, you're very correct. Yes.
Okay. I mean, but you got to get on every week. This person, they eat some coal.
Right. Yeah.
They hate it.
Absolutely. Yeah. That just makes no sense.
I liked what you said there about Moon Knight and using the comparison. The funny one is, I go off, and I know we're getting a little off music topic here, but watching the Daredevil series come out and getting really into that, and then I'm not sure, was Luke Cage and Jessica Jones launched right around the same time?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I really did like Luke Cage, like Jessica Jones, but man, with the Iron Fist, I just couldn't wrap my head around it at all. Like,
I've heard a lot of people say that. Yeah.
What's going on here? And you had these other 3 series, and they were all supposed to come together and be there's a title for that group of
Defenders.
The Defenders. Thank you. The Defenders came out. Watch that. And I'm like, okay, I like this, but for some reason that one just didn't hit. And I wonder if that's where Moon Knight kind of got put in that. We were so weaned off this. I mean, Endgame was just and how do you bring back after years? I do this quite often. Like once a year, I'll start with Iron Man 2008, and I'll
just go through all of them. Yeah.
And that's what I do with Doctor Who. I haven't done it in a while, but I'll go right for Eccleston and right to right now. And I'll do that with Harry Potter, and I'll do that with Star Wars, and I'll do that with Star Trek Next Generation. Yeah. I kind of watch the same stuff over.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
But are we so weaned to like the experience of the lady? You're expecting this, you get this, and you're upset. And was she you mentioned she was a columnist?
Yeah.
Or was she a writer?
Yeah, she was a columnist, and and she totally knew. She's like, I wanted Angry Bruce. I wanted Born in the USA. I wanted this. Magic was an album that came out during the second President Bush years that was really had a lot of political content in it. And for those of you who don't know, Western Stars is very much a album that Bruce did that's basically a collection of short stories, very similar to something like Glenn Campbell would have done, or Burt Bacharach, in that 70s pop, a lot of violins and a lot of strings and other instruments. And then what was amazing is he actually put a band together and filmed him singing the whole album with this band, and put it as a film called Western Stars. And if you guys have not seen that, I think it's a really good film to see, even if you aren't a fan of Bruce's music. Just it talks about, he gives a little bit between the songs and about he's doing it. And it's filmed in this beautiful old barn that's on his property that makes for, it's a character in itself.
And I mean, that's, artists have to choose kind of that pathway of what they're going to do, or record execs, or you have to say, what's the market going with right now? What's happening? We see that in electronic music right now. Tech house is really big with house music right behind it. And then techno is kind of coming through, and techno kind of got put down as the step-headed red child down here. It's really fast, really what you maybe thought in the 90s, and go to a rave and you were hearing techno music, and that genre was what it was called. And it's kind of starting to it's making a comeback, and people are going to say it's going to make a bigger comeback over top of these other brands, and it's cyclical. So as producers, what do you produce? If you're stuck in this genre and it's already seen its come and go, or it's on its downswing, you're not going to probably get that many bookings as an artist, or that many labels are going to be able to pick you up. Or so, they got a lot of money and a lot of people behind these artists say, we think this is the direction you should go with this album, Bruce, or we'd like you to go in the direction. Can you do this for us?
Absolutely.
And make that go. So I see that coming in, being on this side of the fence, not the outside of the fence. And I don't say the magic isn't gone, but when you're on this side of the fence, you're like, I know how that's done.
Well, and I do think that, at times you have to balance, unless, you sell your musical catalog for $500 million to Sony, then you can do whatever the hell you want to do. Right. I think you can't cater totally to your audience. You have to be true to your own vision, but you also have to understand that if I want to make something that's, what it scratches my itch, I have to understand that maybe, I hope my audience will go with me, but what if they don't? I still need to be true to myself as an artist, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I've heard that a lot from producers in the electronic music industry. Be true to your sound, be true to what you want to create.
Right.
If you try producing what everyone else wants out there, or what you think everyone else wants out there, you're producing for them, not yourself.
Yes,
at the end of the day, you might be happy for a short period of time, but in the long run, you'll be like, yeah, I made that for them. But if you made it for yourself, like, I made that, I love this, and you can go forward with that. That is a huge thing that I do here with producers and artists across the board. Well, let's see. We're about to wrap up here. Is there anything else you want to let our DJ Sessions fans know about before we let you get going? Whether it's podcasting, your podcasts, or
So I really recommend that if you're thinking about getting into podcasting, do it. Darren said a great idea, right? That you don't have to spend a lot of money. There is a lot of platforms out there. Find the topic you want to talk about. Make, kind of do a little bit of research. I think other people are going to want to hear this. Come up with a broad enough umbrella that you can last. I really do recommend, a lot of people like, oh, I never show my early ones because they were so bad. That's okay.
That's okay.
Just record. I do say have 3 or 4 in the can, so that when you're ready to record, determine, do you want to co-host, or are you going to do solo? What are you going to do? And then get it out there. And there are tons of Facebook and Twitter groups that will help you. This is not it's a competitive industry, but it's not a competitive industry, right? Like I have there are 5 or 6 other Springsteen podcasts, believe it or not. And we call them my Springsteen siblings, and I talk about them. They've been on my show. I've been on their show, that love. So that's my advice for that. My last plea is absolutely, if you are passionate about music, any kind of music, any musician, reach out to me. I'm at Jesse Jackson DFW on Twitter. The show is at SetListingBruce on Twitter. SetListingBruce@gmail.com is my email address. Send me your information and say, hey, I want to talk about ZZ Top. I want to talk about, Depeche Mode. I want to talk about Paul Williams and his greatest work, right? That he was on. Just tell me, and we'll figure out a time, and we'll talk, and we'll have a great time. And obviously, if you're a Bruce fan, I hope you check out the podcast and listen to me. I'm always looking for guests. I'm always looking for new listeners.
Awesome. Jesse, thank you so much for coming on the DJ Sessions today and sharing with us about your podcast series, your expertise or insights on how to podcast and having a good time. I definitely want to start listening more to the Bruce Springsteen podcast now.
Thanks.
I've grown up watching him. I mean, he started when did Bruce start his career as a musician?
So his first albums were in the early 70s.
Okay.
His first 2 albums did not do well. And then in 76, he released his 3rd album, which is Born to Run.
Okay.
He was on the cover of both Time and Newsweek. He was the first person to ever do that on the same week. And then the 78, he did Darkness on the Edge of Town, which many people consider his greatest album. I don't, but that's because I tend to lean more toward the later stuff. And then, 1980, The River, 82, Nebraska, and then 84, Born in the USA. And I tell everyone who says, or I try to, well, I'm not a Bruce fan. Have you listened to anything besides this stuff on Born in the USA? Because if you're not, you'll hear a little different diversity. Yeah. So he's been going on. He is 72. And he just put out a new album in 2020 called Letter to You.
Now, was that released? I mean, he sold the library to Sony, you mentioned earlier. Yeah. Is he now independently financed? Is he still with a label?
No, he's still with Columbia. And and they still, in fact, they just this past week, as we're recording this, was his 50th anniversary with Columbia, and they put out a little tweet that showed all the albums he's put out. So yeah, he's still doing it. Awesome. And there's going to be a tour in 2023.
Well, we'll definitely have to catch back up with you here in the future. Keep those podcast episodes coming. It's definitely, I commend you on keeping it going for so long. I know it's going to keep going and going and going. You have a great format there, and we'll have to catch up and I'll have to get on Next Stop Everywhere sometime.
That'd be great. I'd
love to do that. Awesome.
All right.
Jesse, thank you so much. And again, you already gave where people can find you, but one more time, where can people find out more information about
Jesse on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW, Facebook Jesse Jackson in Louisville, Texas. Set Listing Bruce. If you go to www.setlistingbruce.com, you can find all about the podcast and hit me up. I'd love to hear your story.
Awesome. Again, Jesse, thanks for coming on the DJ Sessions this afternoon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Everyone be safe.
And thank you. And on that note, don't forget to go to our website, thedjsessions.com. Find us on TikTok, find us on Instagram, Twitch, Twitter, everywhere we're out there. The DJ Sessions. Everything's at thedjsessions.com. That's Jesse. I'm Darren, coming to you in for our podcast series. The DJ Sessions presents the virtual sessions. And remember, on the DJ Sessions, the music never stops.